Good morning. My name is Tim Hirsch. I'm Deputy Director at the Secretariat for GBIF, the Global Biodiversity Information Facility, based in Copenhagen in Denmark. I'm sorry not to be able to participate in person at your conference here today, but I'm pleased through this video presentation to be able to offer some perspectives about where we've got to in GBIF and how we hope that the countries of ASEAN can get more directly involved in our collaboration in future. First of all, a quick reminder of what GBIF is and what it provides. GBIF is an intergovernmental collaboration that was founded originally in 2001 with the aim of promoting and facilitating the free and open access to biodiversity data for use in research and policy. You can see from the homepage here of our global platform, gbif.org, that a very considerable volume of biodiversity data has already been mobilized over the past 15 years. Something like 650 million separate species occurrence records are freely accessible through gbif.org. They cover some 1.6 million species, and they're brought together from over 15,000 separate datasets shared or published by nearly 800 institutions around the world. Just looking at how that data has been mobilized over time, starting on the left in 2008 when GBIF first provided a global data portal, you can see there's been a steady increase in the volume of data that is freely accessible. It's increasing all the time as more and more institutions choose to share or publish their data using the tools, standards and best practices that have been developed over the years through our collaborative community. And that mobilization effort is now recognized through the CBD, the Convention on Biological Diversity, as among the indicators of progress towards the AICHI biodiversity targets, and in particular Target 19 on the sharing of biodiversity knowledge. So by participating in this global effort to mobilize data, it's now recognized through the Biodiversity Indicators Partnership that institutions and governments are contributing to the overall aims of the strategic plan on biodiversity agreed by governments around the world. Looking at the formal participation of GBIF, it is, as I mentioned, a governmental collaboration. You'll see that our 54 country members are somewhat unevenly distributed around the world. There's a particularly high concentration of membership in, for example, North America, Western Europe, Australasia, Oceania, and increasingly Latin America, some parts of Africa, but there are still major membership gaps, including in Asia, where there is somewhat sparse membership. That's not the full picture, as well as the country members. We have associate members, which in Asia includes, for example, ACB, the ASEAN Center for Biodiversity, TIBIF, the Taiwan Biodiversity Information Facility, which has been one of the most active members in mobilizing data, and more recently, the Chinese Academy of Sciences. So when we talk about the mobilization of biodiversity data, what do we really mean? Well, biodiversity data is spread among many different sources and types, and that's everything from the natural history collections of the world, the museums, the herbaria, bringing together specimens collected over the centuries. It involves monitoring activities, field observations, research data, again brought together for many different purposes and originating in many different formats. Increasingly, citizen science, the observations of citizens, providing an increasingly important source of data on the distribution of species, remote sensing, historical literature, etc. The uses and users of data are equally dispersed and various, from scientific uses such as taxonomy, policy uses such as in conservation, biosecurity, land use planning, responses to climate change, etc. That space in the middle, the conversion of that data originating in many different sources and types, and making it available and useful for those policy and scientific uses is really the space that the GBIF collaborative community occupies. And it's that process of integration and availability that is at the core of GBIF's activities, and which you'll hear much more about in the course of today. It is more than a technical collaboration. It's an institutional collaboration bringing together many different partners, from the data owners, the providers in, for example, universities, research institutions, museums, herbaria, through to the users in ministries and research institutions. The key to all of this is standardization. How do you take, for example, a specimen such as an insect in an entomological collection, accompanied by a label with certain types of information? How do you standardize that in ways that it can be digitally used and accessed and integrated with many different sources? And the key to that is really boiling down the information contained in that label and associated with the specimen into certain core elements. And it's sometimes what we refer to as the what, where, when of species occurrence. What is the species? Well, that of course is something that can be found on the label. Where was it found? What geolocation information is contained on that label? When was it found? What was the date? What type of evidence are we talking about? What's the context of that collection event, the methodologies of collecting that information? And by bringing together all of these key elements in standard formats, we're able, through our community, to convert these diverse sources of evidence into standardized data that can be integrated and accessed. And that's really the core of what GBIF is all about. Another important element that arises from this is what sometimes is referred to as data repatriation. Let's just take the example of Thailand, where this meeting is taking place, of course. Thailand is not currently a national member of GBIF, but nevertheless, there is a considerable amount of data, biodiversity data, relating to Thailand that is accessible through GBIF. And that is through the process of repatriation, whereby specimens, observations that are shared from institutions outside Thailand can be made available in these standard formats, so that researchers looking into biodiversity trends and information about biodiversity in Thailand have access to that data. And just looking at the numbers there, the data that you can see represented by the dots on this map come from 580 separate data sets that are shared from 33 different countries, and in all something over 800,000 records. And you can see down here the countries from which that data is shared through various institutions, with the United States being at the top, Netherlands, the United Kingdom, Japan, etc. So even before Thailand is actively sharing data in significant volumes, there is still a reasonable amount of data that is available through GBIF. But of course, that data will become much richer and more complete as more institutions within Thailand join this process and also publish or share that data using the same types of format. When you look at the usefulness and really the purpose, one of the principal purposes of sharing and publishing this data, we can find that in the way in which scientific research is using and citing use of GBIF as a source of data. And we in the Secretariat actively track the scientific literature and look at the number of peer-reviewed papers that are citing GBIF as the source of the data that contributes to their research. And you can see from this graph on the right that the number of those peer-reviewed papers citing use of GBIF as a data source is increasing all the time, so that in 2015, something like 400 separate peer-reviewed journal articles were making use of data through GBIF. And what type of uses are we talking about? Well, just from that analysis of the uses in our latest science review for 2014, we do one every year, you can see that it's over a range of policy relevant areas of research, everything from invasive alien species to impacts of climate change, species conservation and protected areas, biodiversity and human health, food security through food and farming, and a wide range of different scientific disciplines. So the data that's been mobilized is already being extensively used and increasingly used in research. An important part of what's been developed more recently in GBIF is to provide ever more useful and practical ways in which data used in research and policy can be properly cited and attributed to those who've taken the trouble and made the effort to collect that data and then to share it using these standard formats. And as an example, here is a data set that's been shared from Estonia, and you'll see that each individual data set that's shared using our tools is given a DOI, a digital object identifier, so that there's an easy way for anyone using data that has been accessed through GBIF to properly cite and credit those responsible for sharing the data. That's taken further in DOIs, digital object identifiers, that are now also given for each data download, so that typically a researcher may well be downloading and using data, sometimes millions of individual records coming from hundreds of different data sets. And through the use of DOIs, there is now a practical means to cite that data in a way that gives due credit to those who've shared it. And that's very important in providing the incentives and the recognition in this data sharing and publication effort. I just wanted to finish this quick look at the activities of GBIF by pointing out that even though, as I mentioned at the beginning of this talk, there is still relatively little representation from Asia, we have been able recently to bring in some measures and some activities aimed at supporting data mobilization in Asia. This year, through a fund that we've called the Biodiversity Information Fund for Asia, using funds kindly provided by the government of Japan's Ministry of Environment. And we invited our members and partners in Asia to propose projects for use of that fund, and we're pleased to say that during this year there are 4 projects that will be supported under this fund. The first, led by TIBIF, is what's been described as a biodiversity informatics cookbook, a regional training for Asia and the development of a biodiversity informatics curriculum to help build up the best practices and the capacity within the Asia region to use the tools favoured by GBIF to share data. The second project is the development of a national biodiversity database system for Vietnam, which is being developed in partnership with Japan, and we're very hopeful that Vietnam will soon become our latest national member in Asia. A third project is being led by ACB, by the ASEAN Centre for Biodiversity, and that's focusing on the mobilization of biodiversity data from ASEAN protected areas. And finally, a project to strengthen our partners in the Philippines and to bring together various national partners and stakeholders in that country to promote the sharing and publication of biodiversity data. So we're hopeful that this can be the start of more active involvement from this region and we very much hope that increasingly our partners in ASEAN, in Southeast Asia, will recognise the importance and the benefits of bringing more and more biodiversity data available for reuse. So that's all I had to say. I'm very happy. I can't, of course, personally respond to questions, but I'd be more than happy to take any questions by email after this meeting. Sheila and others and her colleagues, of course, have my contact details, and many of our partners are involved in this meeting, and I hope can provide some explanation and clarification of our activities. So thank you very much for this opportunity. As I say, I'm sorry I can't be there in person, but I do hope, and I'm sure you will have, a very successful day. Thank you.